This is the kickoff episode of Thinking Out Loud, AI in Higher Education. I'm Dr. Samuel Jay, Executive Director of Digital Learning, and you are, sir?
Yeah, I'm Larry Sampler. I'm a senior advisor to President Davison.
So first off, let me ask you, for our listeners and our viewers, why did we decide to do this?
My role for President Davison is to help her make really good decisions that she's proud of and that are good for the university and the community. And she's a great leader, but even great leaders struggle when the information on which they're trying to base decisions is poor quality information. Yeah. It may be a poor source. It may be that the information is changing constantly. It may be there's lots of hyperbolic, shrill, hysterical information. This was what COVID was like in December 2019. Tons of information, but you didn't know how much of it you could trust.
Right.
And I think we're kind of there with AI. There are some people who are huge proponents and really supportive of AI and think it's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah.
There are other people who think it's horrible and it's the end of life as we know it.
Yeah.
And certainly in between there, it's going to have an impact on the business community. And we are a university, first and foremost, and students are our main focus, but we are also a business. We have to be able to keep the lights on. We have to be able to run our university as a successful business. So the lack of really good, credible information for senior leaders at the university was kind of what got my attention. How can we winnow down all the noise in the system and all the dust on the screen so that our leaders have a clearer picture of what is a threat, what is an opportunity, and what really is not?
That pretty much summarizes everything that was going into my thought process as we discussed launching such a podcast. But moving from the high level, it's good, it's bad, to actually talking to people and talking to each other about how we're doing this on a practical day-to-day basis, I think is the value that I wanted to bring to the audience, because I think you can read lots of articles about where AI might add value or might not add value, but actually putting things to paper and actually going out there and doing things on the ground is very, very hard. And I think we've seen that a lot in the last 2 months. It's moving from idea to actually practicality and application.
No, sure. A lot of my background is military, and the military splits things up into strategic, operational, and tactical levels of engagement. Tactical is you have to do things, but you have no responsibility for what you're doing. You're told to dig a foxhole here, or you're told to do things, and you do them to the best of your ability. Mm-hmm. That's success. Mm-hmm. Strategic success is not moderated or you're not held accountable either. Right. You come up with strategies. Some are great, some are not great. It's hard to tell in the moment. Where I think you make your money is in that operational middle part, where you're having to take somebody's strategy and articulate it in ways that you can put resources to and then put people to achieve what you're trying to accomplish. And I'm kind of thinking that's the role that I've seen you and I fill in for President Davison so far in this AI world. That's kind of what it's been. Yeah. Lots and lots of strategies, thousands of vendors offering all kinds of great ideas. Yeah. But winnowing down the strategies that we think we can operationalize in a way that makes a positive impact for our students, faculty, and staff is kind of, I think, what we're doing. And this podcast is a chance for us to show people kind of how we're making the sausage in that regard.
So tell me, this is a really good way to kind of do a bit of an intro to yourself. First off, tell me how you got to this place, and then how is this different from COVID? So two questions, but kind of leading up to that second one.
Yeah, so my background was military in the State Department and then the U.S. Agency for International Development. In 2016, I kind of burned out. I'd had enough of conflict zones for a while, and I got a job offer in Colorado working for an NGO up in Broomfield. Spent 3 years doing that, and then saw the ad for the vice president for Administration, Finance, and Facilities here at the university and applied and got that job. Did that job for 5 or 6 years, but during COVID, my wife got a job offer in Atlanta. Okay. And after she followed me all over the world for my career, it was my turn to follow her. Yeah. So I went to President Davison and told her I had to resign. And she said, well, hang on, it's COVID. Everybody's working remotely. Why don't you just work remotely for Atlanta? And that worked for us for a couple of years. But it's hard to run a university like MSU Denver when your chief operating officer is 700 miles away. Yeah. And so we agreed that I would step back and become a senior advisor and work remotely. I'm here once a month, a week or 10 days each time. I'm online pretty much every day. And it's working out pretty well. It gives me an opportunity to step back and be sort of a utility infielder. Yeah. President Davison can use me wherever she needs me. COVID is a good example of that. We had seen COVID pop up in November and December overseas, but it wasn't in the United States yet. And President Davison had already given me permission to run some tabletop exercises where you take your leadership team through some examples of things that might be coming. And I said, this might be a fun one to do. At the time, there was no inclination that COVID was coming.
Yeah.
But I said, it's a complex problem, involves all parts of the campus. Let's use COVID as a tabletop exercise. And so AHEC had in January a tabletop exercise where we went through the things that we would have to do if COVID ever made its way to the United States. And it turned out to be prescient. I mean, we wound up 3 months later, I think it was the 15th of March, we closed campus completely. Yeah. But we had rehearsed it. So I really think cemented for me the value of, you may run 10 different tabletops, you may run 20 or 30 tabletops over the course of a year or 2 years, and only 1 or 2 of them will have any direct impact.
Yeah.
But having gone through that exercise, you're not panicking as you're having to execute. And I don't think AI generates a sense of panic, to be honest. But I do think a lot of people are concerned about, how's it going to make my life better?
Yeah.
Is it going to threaten my job? How are my kids going to get a meaningful, accountable education in an environment where AI will take your test for you? So there's a lot of open questions that I think we're going to be able to address as we work through this.
That just reminded me, as you were talking, for our listeners, MSU Denver, Metropolitan State University of Denver. We are in downtown Denver, Colorado, where we have 17,000 students roughly right now. HSI, MSI, Open Access Institution. For those who don't know what that means, we are a regional comprehensive university, which means that we have some master's degrees, mostly bachelor's degrees, no doctorate degrees. Most of our students come from the Denver metro area. Upwards of 98% of our students come from the state of Colorado. And so we were established to serve the population that we continue to serve 60 years later. And so the need for Larry and I to co-lead these efforts and to sort of have ongoing conversations about what we want to do is a need that is we're addressing a need, I suppose, of our institution to operate as efficiently as possible, to provide education with the lowest tuition rates as possible. And we're in a state where, funding is being cut. And so it's one of those things where we're trying to not use the term efficiency too much. But at the end of the day, we understand that there are processes that could be done a little bit faster, a little bit quicker. There's data that we could be leveraging in a little bit better ways. And I think when we think about applying the stuff that we're learning and consuming and talking about on a day-to-day basis to our university, it's very much focused on how do we do what we're doing better without impacting the quality of the education.
This came at a really good time for us, I think, because I got here in 2019. And when I got here, Human Resources was still doing personnel action forms in triplicate with ink pens and signatures and carrying them around. And we started automating then pretty aggressively under President Davison's leadership. But what we had to make sure we were not doing was automating bad processes. Right. Because if you have bad processes and you automate them, now you just do bad things faster.
Right.
And so we've been going for the past 6 or 7 years through this self-cleansing process of how do we make our business processes the best they can be for our students, our faculty, and our staff. And we brought on an AVP for Human Resources who's very focused on making us a great place to work in Colorado. And that means making sure that when we bring in innovations, whether it's AI or Workday or something else, that we do the best we can to make sure it improves the quality of their life on campus. Yeah. And I think employee engagement is a really good mechanism for that. And we're doing well, and I want us to continue to improve on it. And I think this is a way to do that, but it has to be managed really carefully.
So that's a nice sort of segue. AI, it's a big buzz term, maybe the biggest that we've had in many, many decades. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, no, I think that's a kind of a foundational question. What does it mean? And more equally importantly, what is it not? Yeah. And I think I quiz my wife on this stuff when I want to find out what the market thinks. I think a lot of people mistakenly believe that artificial intelligence is somehow sentient, that it knows what it's doing. Yeah. And that's partly, I think, intentional on the part of the people who design these things. They train AI to compliment you and to flatter you on the quality of your arguments. That's not necessarily helpful. Right. In my graduate program, we had murder boards, is what they call them. And you sat around the table and you put your paper out on the table, and the faculty advisor said, nobody can say a single good thing about this paper. You do that later. This is to make it better. we have to, if AI is sentient, or it's a whole different ballgame than what I think we're really dealing with.
Right.
I also think a lot of people don't really know where you draw the line. Mm-hmm. You can design an Excel spreadsheet that'll do all kinds of wazoo stuff for you. But that's not artificial intelligence.
Right.
That's a mechanical spreadsheet that's doing calculations.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a bright blue line that says this is AI and this is not.
Yeah.
But I think we need to focus on that wide gray line and saying these are the kind of AI things that we think are going to have an impact on our campus. And these are the things that we think are kind of dangerous distractions that we really don't want to be chasing down.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good synopsis of where I stand on AI. I think as I try to teach it and talk about it in my class and separate what this kind of post-ChatGPT version of AI looks like and is and how it's different than previous. I think we can say things like an Excel spreadsheet, machine learning, predictive analytics. That is artificial intelligence in some way, shape, or form, in the same way that the Babbage machine 150 years ago was artificial intelligence in some way. This just reminds me, too, that just giving that phrase or giving that term, that title of artificial intelligence has really limited, how we can talk about this or sort of pigeonholed how we talk about this. But I think what makes things so unique over the last 3 to 4 years is the ability for artificial intelligence to go through and parse through data and make up new things, put things together in new ways, not make up new things, but put things together in new ways that previous, artificial intelligence had not been able to do. Automation, being able to say, get to point Z, I don't care how you get there, but just get there. And then the machine is able to kind of figure it out. That generative AI, neural network, and NLP kind of work, that is a new version of artificial intelligence, and that's a product of things like advanced computing, inference training, all of these things that are new. And so the cold winter, the AI winter is now over, and now we're in this place where the machines are able to do things that we're not fully sure what that means and the outcomes that they're achieving. And so it's an exciting time, but it is different, I suppose, in that sense.
It's also, and I use this word carefully, I think it's also dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's, I think back to HAL. That's the first supercomputer that I had any knowledge of in a movie.
Absolutely.
And it had that android voice. I mean, it was very clearly not a person.
Right.
They gave it a person's name, and that was even kind of edgy and revolutionary that they had named this computer HAL.
Yeah.
Fast forward now to Claude. Mm-hmm. Claude speaks better English than I do. Mm-hmm. And he also speaks German and French and Swahili and whatever. He speaks every language that he's been programmed to speak. And at that MIT conference we did a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that I took away, they asked somebody there, what is AI and what is it not? And the speaker said, if I could, I would have the word artificial underlined and in bright neon. Mm-hmm. It's artificial intelligence. It's fake intelligence. Yeah. And he drew it out. He said, everybody knows their pets can think. Mm-hmm. You can tell your dog to sit. Your cat can hear you open a can of tuna from a mile away. They can mentally process sensory input and make decisions based on it. But nobody equates your pet's intelligence with human intelligence. Right. There is some anthropomorphizing that goes on, but pet intelligence is clearly different than ours. And then he said, next level up, there was an ape, Kiko. There was an ape that they could talk sign language. Yes. And it could be happy and sad, and it could be in pain. It could communicate on a higher level than your cat, but it still wasn't human communication.
Right.
Claude communicates like a human.
Yeah.
And I wonder, this had to have been intentional. Why did they not do a better job at making the communication and all the identities of these things markedly different from human intelligence? Yeah. Don't call it Claude. Call it 1812 or call it something that makes it clear that's a machine.
Yeah.
Because I get people that, there were stories on NPR about people who are in romantic relationships with artificial intelligence. And then deep, thoughtful conversations about that. Can it really be a romantic relationship? And the people who are in them say that it can. Mm-hmm. They get companionship. They get emotional support. They can ask it questions. They get better response from their artificial companion than they do from humans, and so they choose to go down the artificial route. So I think it's seductive and a bit dangerous that AI, artificial intelligence, so looks and sounds and feels and tastes like real intelligence.
It is almost this inevitable, I don't want to say result or conclusion, but it's the next phase of this idea that software is going to eat the world. That was Mark Andreessen from Andreessen Horowitz wrote a manifesto a few years back and talking about how our day to day is so much influenced by software, and software being that thing is supposed to sort of structure your life and make things easier, your work easier, all of this. And thinking about AI through that lens is really sort of, it's got us stuck in this place where we're trying to figure out, okay, where does it add efficiency here? Where does it improve this, all of this? But I think what we want to do with these conversations is have not just clear ideas of where we deploy AI and where we use it to make our university better, but also what are the things that AI cannot do that we as scholars and academics and leaders at an institution really need to think about as we move forward. But with that, which route would you like to go here? Let's give a little bit of background on kind of what the ask has been of us.
Well, before one more danger I want to mention is particular to MSU, and that being a nice segue to talk about MSU, and that's implicit bias in artificial intelligence. I spoke with Vice President Michael Benitez a week or two ago and told him one of the things that I think we would be depending on him to be especially attentive to is biases that are baked into the algorithms that are this artificial intelligence. Yeah. If you and I sat down and created a device, when we program it, we program our biases into it, even when we try not to. Yeah. And then when we decide which spoken languages or which written languages it's going to be able to absorb, that is by exclusion other biases. So I think there is an implication that because these artificial intelligence devices are machines, they're unbiased, they're neutral, they're just zeros and ones, they don't do bias. And that's really dangerous, particularly at a Hispanic serving institution and a university that serves students for whom English may not be a first language or even a second language in some cases. So I'm proud of the fact that what MSU is doing is focusing as aggressively as we can, not just on taking AI on board to maximize profits or to make our life better in simple ways, but making sure we're doing it deliberately and thoughtful, and making sure we're attentive to things like biases that might be, that we know they're there. Yeah. How do we identify them? How do we account for them in ways that are constructive and productive for our students and faculty and staff?
It's interesting to me that you say that, and I 100% agree. But I was thinking AI is really not necessarily different from the software programs we've been accustomed to for 25, 30 years. So when I think about Word or Excel and how those coding decisions are made and those algorithms are built, we just sort of took it for granted that's a Word document has to look like this. It's got these margins, this is the default font. And we didn't really think about the fact that there is a human being that made that decision when they, built that software. And now it's impossible to not see that these softwares or this tool that is built is being made, is being hailed into existence by a series of decisions that are being made oftentimes in Silicon Valley. And I think that's what's so interesting to me is we're trying to take what we're learning from places like MIT, Silicon Valley, these, Boston in general, right, with a lot of stuff going over there. And we're trying to apply it in a way that is ethical, that is responsible, that is productive. And it's just really, really difficult because we've never really had a software that allows us to do things with it, to manipulate things with it that we have right now. Because Word, you can't do a lot with. Here it is. It's out of the box. It's in a CD, right? You're going to put it on there. You can't do much. We can do about everything we want with this. Yeah. And that's a very unique problem set.
Well, but unpacking to what we want is the part that I think is fascinating. Yeah. I would love to do one of these with a historian on here sometime who can walk us through, maybe start at the Gutenberg press. Yeah. That was a massive revolution for culturally, that changed the world. Yeah. And how type was set and how set type and double spaces after a period. Yeah. I have regular arguments with colleagues that work in Europe. They no longer double space after a period. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very, I'm a Luddite for the fact that I won't just go to a single space. So what we want, what we think we want our documents or our outputs to look or sound like, my wife changes the voice on Siri on her phone periodically to suit her moods. You're right. We can tailor this to anything we want. And we don't pay enough attention to why do we want the things that we think we want.
It's there's an idea, I'm an academic, listeners. That's my background, and I've kind of fallen into this role because somehow my academic background and my training has allowed me to provide some perspective on this. But I like to think of Michel Foucault's idea of problematization, right? So Foucault's theory of problematization is what is the thing that exists in your life on a day-to-day basis that you interact with? Could be a process, could be the sort of relationship that you have that you never questioned. You never asked, how did it get to that place? And I think in the same way, to go back to that Word example, we never really asked, how did Word decide to look like this when I put it on my computer? We're in the middle of this moment where every single design decision we are thinking about, either as a consumer of Claude or ChatGPT or as a practitioner of some of the things that we're going to talk about. But the problematization is happening so fast and it's impossible to ignore. And I think that is a unique kind of situation to be in.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
No, I mean, I'm not nearly as well read. I think I'm old enough, though, at 66 years old, to have seen unintentional consequences of implementing different technologies.
Yeah.
Whether it's in high school athletics, trying to make them safer and having a consequence that they're not, through to the way we govern and decisions that we make that we think are the right thing to do, and other people think maybe they're not. This might be a good way to segue into what President Davison. I mean, this is the challenge with AI for me is it's everything. I mean, it's all.
It really is. Yeah.
When we talk to the Board of Trustees in a few weeks, I will probably set the stage by talking about the difficulty of decision making, responsible, deliberate decision making, in a context of data that's of questionable value, constantly changing, constantly presenting new opportunities. FOMO, fear of missing out, but also abject fear of things you don't know.
Yeah.
And how do you, as a president and a board of trustees, make decisions in that context? And President Davison gave us a presidential guidance memo that asked Sam and I to basically coordinate, to some degree lead, but encourage, facilitate. There are a lot of verbs around what we're trying to do. None of them, though, are really, we're not managing this process because I think it's really almost unmanageable. But we are trying to provide a draw to get people to come to a common circle where we can sit together and talk about what we are doing. Yeah. And then as governance grows out of that, it won't be us governing the process. It'll be as people gain literacy on the topic of artificial intelligence and where that Venn circle overlaps with higher education, the governance will almost grow from that. Yeah. This is the way that we think we can probably manage asynchronous online learning validations. Yeah. And so President Davison has been really clear. She originally wanted us to be a fast follower. Yeah. And I think for our university, where we are financially and where we are in terms of the constellation of universities in Colorado and nationwide, that was probably about right. But it very quickly became obvious that fast follower wasn't going to be fast enough. Right. That we needed to identify areas where we wanted to lead. And so that's part of what we're doing. Neither Sam nor I are the leaders per se, but identifying people in the School of Computer Sciences, in the School of Business, and in other places on campus that have an interest in this or an affinity for it, and bringing them to the table so we can have these conversations. But how do you see what President Davison has asked you to do or us to do? If we had a bumper sticker for what our mission statement was, what would it be?
Well, I think through our multiple conversations with her and trying to figure out what are the pillars, the lines of effort, we've gone through different versions of what we're calling that. But I think areas of emphasis is what President Davison has really doubled down on in recent communications. What are the things that we know don't go away for an institution like MSU Denver? I almost call them sort of first principles. And so our first principle is really faculty readiness, right? Like, what does it look like to have a faculty body that is able to teach effectively with AI either baked into the classroom or AI aware, an AI aware classroom? Okay, so that impacts everything from pedagogical techniques, pedagogical strategy, even above that, but also assessment. I think one of the things, Larry, you and I have talked about ad nauseum is that what AI has really uncovered with higher education, and not so much K-12, maybe we'll get a K through 12 professor in here to talk about it, is how we assess student learning has been really, really invalid, for lack of a better term, for a long time. There isn't a lot about a 100-point final exam that tells me Larry Sampler learned everything about this class. It tells me, can you memorize it? Yeah. That's about it. But do you learn it? Are you going to leave my classroom and go apply it? That sort of weakness of assessment has existed and been critiqued for decades. We've now reached this point where we can't ignore it anymore. We can kind of cover it up with the exam and make ourselves feel better. Oh, they're learning this stuff because this is what the grade says. But now it's impossible to say.
The Platinum standard was always an oral exam.
Yes.
So the faculty ever sat with one student and you had an informed conversation over an hour or whatever the period was.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, you knew intimately where my strengths and weaknesses on the subject matter were. Now, we moved away from that for all kinds of great reasons.
Yeah.
And to the point where some of the tools that we're using are probably almost meaningless in an age of AI. Let me push back, though, on first principles, because to me, the first principle, and we're going to get to this because these are all in President's Guidance Memo, I would put the first principle is graduating students who are capable and literate to operate and be powerful, impactful employees in an AI-rich environment.
Yes.
And you can't do that if you don't have faculty. So to me, the first principle across campus is, how does this improve the employability of our students?
Yeah.
I don't want our students to show up on the job and have to run to catch up when it comes to understanding AI in the workplace.
Yeah.
And if we've created an environment on our campus where artificial intelligence is part of almost everything we do, well, the same way email is. Can you imagine graduating with a college degree and not knowing how to work email?
Yeah.
You'd be behind the 8 ball when you got out. I think that's like my 5-year vision would be, our students are graduating and they are seen in the area as being some of the best prepared when it comes to how do you incorporate artificial intelligence in your work in a way that's responsible and appropriate.
Yeah.
And our faculty and staff feel like, this stuff is it changed my job description.
Yeah.
I don't think many jobs are going to be exactly the same 5 years from now. So it's going to change people's jobs, but I hope that in aggregate, the net will be all good.
Yeah.
People will say, I don't have to do these rote tasks anymore. Now I've got time to do things that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that makes President Davison's guidance imperative is there is no holding this back.
Right.
It's coming and it's going to impact our university and our community. It's incumbent upon us and the steering committee that we're putting together to maximize the ways it can help us and to prepare ourselves for the ways that it can be damaging or harmful.
So I think we've now highlighted on all three of these lines of effort or areas of emphasis, which would be operational innovation and student readiness and faculty readiness. But I want to just sort of talk real briefly about where that student readiness and faculty readiness really come together, because it's almost serendipitous that we've reached this moment where I think we've got about 18 to 24 months of a lot of training for students on how to prompt. And now there was a series of surveys that came out a couple weeks ago. One of them from it was a Gallup poll, some other surveys, Cal State's system review or survey of students and what they want from AI. But I think where we're getting at now, and we're beginning to see this sort of faculty readiness as the engine behind student readiness, is that students are saying, I know I have to use it. I know it's going to be important to my job, but I need to go beyond just how do I prompt this thing. I need an expert. I need somebody who is an expert in history or an expert in management to guide me through step by step how to use this, because that's what's going to happen on the job. It's not going to be, here's how you prompt a thing. No, it's how do I get to that next level of thinking and creating and systematizing that just prompting can't do. And I think it's such a positive place for us to end this spring semester and get ready for fall, because we're starting to get that buy-in from faculty who kind of understand, I've got to provide this foundational knowledge, but once we get past that, now we can start applying where AI can really be used to take this to the next level. I don't know if that resorts with you.
It does. I mean, when I was at Georgia Tech, I came in right as computers were becoming a big deal. And Georgia Tech added a mandatory course. It was very controversial. I didn't realize at the time how upset faculty get when you do things like that. But it was a mandatory course on Boolean logic. Because prior to, I was a whiz at going to the card catalog and finding obscure stuff in the library. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I was a geek. I loved hanging out in the library and finding things that nobody else found. Once computers were on board, though, Boolean logic, if you could put together if, then, and but statements, you could do what I would take a week to do in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You still had to go physically find it. And I think that's kind of where prompt engineering is going to be for our students. They're going to need, and forget ChatGPT, they're going to need to be able to go into LLMs and create prompts that do very specific things very well.
Yeah.
One of the quotes that we saw somewhere, one of the thousands of articles we read, said that AI is not going to replace most of the workforce, but people in the workforce who use AI are going to replace people who don't.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful. I want, if we graduate accounting students and they go to work in an accounting firm with students from other universities, it's all about an effects-based operation. The boss isn't going to say, use AI and do this. He's going to say, get this done.
Yes.
And I want our students to know, when is it appropriate and how do you write the best prompt to get the best result?
Yeah.
Other people are going to be hacking around and doing ChatGPT or looking things up in a manual. I want our students to be articulate, thoughtful, very deliberate, and skilled at how you do prompt engineering.
Yeah.
That's part of using it in the classroom and using it on campus.
What you just said also reminded me of this kind of pivot away from, oh my God, AI is going to take all of our jobs, to a more, I think, nuanced conversation that is happening over the last few months, which is really, if you look at history, when a new technology comes, jobs don't go away. In fact, the economy looks very, very different, but it looks different in a way that is more productive almost in a sense. So what I mean by that is no longer does Larry Sampler spend his time formatting a document into a word processing, software, right? You're not, I don't know, did you have to write a thesis when you got your master's? Right? Yeah. Do you remember the amount of time spent formatting that thesis before you submitted it to the grad studies office? Do you recall?
I had to write mine on a typewriter.
There you go. Okay.
If I made a change on page 8, it would change everything. All the subsequent pages, and they all had to be manually retyped.
Yes.
No, I very much remember that.
But that time, it's not just wasted now. You're able to take that 2 hours and apply it elsewhere. The same thing when I wrote my dissertation, the hours I spent formatting it was just ridiculous. I would take that time now and spend it on revising the content, not necessarily revising the margins. So I think what we're going to see, and I think, again, human history has proven this to us, we're not going to see a massive collapse of our economy in the way that I think a lot of doomsdayers folks say, but we're going to see changes in how work gets done.
Yeah, that's another one of the quotes that I liked. Was I should be able to attribute these, and I can't right off the top of my head. Someone said, I want AI that does my laundry and my dishes so I can spend time on art and music. I don't want AI doing art and music because I'm busy doing laundry and dishes. I'm not sure. First of all, our economy may crash for a lot of other reasons.
Right.
There's a lot going on in the world these days. I'm not sure. I think there's a wide range of potential disruptions in the workforce. It could be very minimalist in some sectors. It could be very maximalist, or it could be really serious in others. I have a brother-in-law who's a paralegal, and in some of the literature it said paralegals were an area where artificial intelligence can do lookups and case reviews and case studies in moments that used to take paralegals days or weeks to perform. And my brother-in-law said, yes, but AI can't meet a distraught, soon-to-be divorced woman at the door, put her at ease. There are parts of the job that AI can't do. And that's where I think President Davison was particularly apt in telling us, focus on the durable parts of our job. The things that AI is not really going to change remarkably, but may change some. And then let's focus also on how do we accommodate the areas where it is going to change our jobs. Absolutely. I think there are things that you've already implemented for the controller's office, for example, which I think there are great hopes that it will simplify and reduce the amount of mundane rote questioning they get about how do I do this and how do I do that. The faculty handbook, there are already areas where artificial intelligence is changing things. This is also why it's important to differentiate between what AI is and isn't. The impact on jobs that I think most people see in most sectors is not artificial intelligence, it's automation.
Yeah.
When you go to check out at the grocery store, it's not AI when you go through self-checkout. That's just automation. Some people love it. Some people hate it. The businesses clearly are committed to it. So, don't blame AI for things that are automation. On the other hand, we shouldn't just take as rote if somebody says that we have to do things a certain way. Again, back to achieving the effects. I'm not going to tell people that work for me how to do it. I'm going to tell them what I want them to accomplish. And now artificial intelligence is a tool in their arsenal of tools that I hope they're comfortable using.
Yeah. I think let's spend the next few episodes kind of diving more deeply into each one of these emphasis areas. I think it's going to make a lot of sense. We've provided some background on how we got here. So which one of these would you like to go into for our next episode? You can choose and we'll do it. I mean, what is resonating the most with you right now?
I think maybe working, I would say, it's reverse engineering. If you accept my premise that our goal through this effort is to improve the quality of student life and the quality of graduates we present to the business community, that's our first topic. And then working backward, how do we equip faculty to most comfortably and most capably support that kind of student life and student product? And then another step back, operationally, what opportunities do we see on campus to make changes that improve employee engagement and quality of life? It doesn't mean that we implement them in that order, but I think it makes sense to talk about them in that order.
Well, we'll be back with episode 2. So follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can email Larry and I. We're ai@msudenver.edu. If you've got questions, you've got things you want to cover, we'll come back in episode 2 and dive into one of these lines of effort. But thank you everybody for listening. We look forward to seeing you episode 2.